Hello my dear friends, and welcome back to another Star Wars video. So today we have some vital topics that we need to discuss. We've got some pretty major news concerning the future of The Mandalorian, but first, I want to discuss what appears to be one of the biggest misconceptions from fans who loved the Acolyte to those like myself who didn't, and who genuinely in good faith watched the series and had some critiques. There is still so much infighting within fandom spaces. Nonetheless, one thing I keep seeing from fans who love the show is anger and outrage that we didn't like the character of the stranger, Qimir, that his brutality and fight sequences was so underappreciated. That's what I've heard them say. But I want to debunk this. Were there problems with the writing of Manny Jacinto's character? Yes. Were there issues with lore? Sure. But I want to be the first to say, Qimir was one of the characters I took least issue with. I'm not talking about the cringe jokes about him and Osha getting together, none of that. As a Sith, Qimir was the most wasted character of the show. Manny Jacinto, fantastic actor, did the best he could, bringing an intense physicality, a cruelty to the Sith, referring to Jeki as an it, because he perceived Jedi and their Padawans as scum. When he was on screen, those moments were some of the highs, in a show that didn't have too many of them. And the reason I say the writing surrounding Qimir was so disappointing is because The Acolyte was marketed as a Sith-oriented series. I don't think it's a secret to anyone that I'm a prequel fanatic. Go to my channel, check out my videos. So when you've got a show that promises to be the precursor to The Phantom Menace, we're thinking, okay, so this is 100 years before episode 1. How is it going to connect to, I guess, Darth Plagueis and the Sith, Rule of Two lineage that leads to Palpatine? We were thinking maybe Tenebrous, Plagueis, but we always knew if and when they were going to introduce a new Sith, it would still maintain a very significant connection, at least referencing the lore and Sith heritage that goes back to Darth Bane. But it felt as though the writers didn't respect any of that, and had they given us an alternative, a Disney canon new outlook on the Sith, that would have also been fine. But the show made some terrible decisions, flip-flopping with the characters of Osha and May, using Darth Plagueis for a brief 2-second cameo as fan service. So what I'm trying to say is this. I think the story would have worked so much better if the focus had been on Qimir's rise to power, or desire to rise to power. More interactions with the Sith Master behind everything. I was fine with the hierarchy, Master, Apprentice, Acolyte. In fact, in Star Wars Legends, there are many Sith Acolytes beneath the Apprentice. But imagine if instead of the way Disney Plus presented it, it was the story of Qimir's rise as an Acolyte in a sea of other would-be apprentices. And one fan suggestion that I really love is if they started the show by presenting us with Qimir's time as a Jedi Padawan and his pull to the dark side. You could explore the Sith traditions, their goals during this time, talking about the eventual execution of the Grand Plan, obviously what went down with Venestra, his life post-Jedi, and his recruitment as an Acolyte candidate by a Sith. That kind of inner conflict, that process of turning to the dark side, being wary but ultimately craving it, is what James Luceno explored in the Plagueis novel with Palpatine. And sure, Palpatine was never a Jedi, but the freedom from constraints of your inner turmoil, embracing power and control, the allure of the forbidden, and being shown the risks of falling down that rabbit hole would have made Qimir a much stronger character in my book. The dichotomy between light and dark sometimes blurs, and you know this if you've ever read the Bane trilogy, how dark side users don't necessarily think what they're doing is evil. Some of them relished in it, don't get me wrong, but it's like what Sidious himself said, good is a point of view. Many dark side users believe they are justified in their actions, often viewing their pursuit of power or revenge as necessary or even righteous, rationalizing actions through a lens of power or survival. And so from this pull to the dark, we could have potentially have been shown Qimir competing with other Acolytes. I just didn't find the characters of Osha or May compelling enough to warrant that story. I know Kathleen Kennedy and Leslie Headland talk about sisterhood being a big motivation, but if we're talking strictly about a Sith show, Qimir and Plagueis would have been the perfect antagonists. If the show had been refocused to be about Plagueis' first apprentice, we could have had some insane moments where he was put through some mental and physical tests, some of them grueling. There could have been a sizing up of the Sith during this era. There was something special about Qimir, something Plagueis saw in him that set him aside from the other Acolytes. The Sith, working in secret, but ever ready to take on the challenge of plotting their revenge. We could have learned why Qimir ultimately failed, since we know Plagueis is the only one of the two that would survive. How maybe Qimir betrayed him, and Plagueis took his revenge. And this could have foreshadowed the way Palpatine further down the line also betrays Plagueis by getting him drunk and killing him in his sleep. This dynamic could have been a power struggle like we've never seen in live action. Plagueis constantly pushing Qimir to the limits, fueling his anger, testing his loyalty and ambition, showing him secrets of the dark side, his experiments with life and death. They could have even gone into the philosophical aspects of Darth Plagueis' mind.
And for goodness sake, they should not have revealed themselves to the Jedi. What in the sweet nectar Bacta was Leslie Headland thinking? George Lucas explicitly said that this is a period of time where the Jedi are oblivious to the existence of the Sith. They ain't meant to come across one until Maul in The Phantom Menace. I don't give a squiggly quacta if all the Jedi, apart from Greenie the Meanie, died, and so it's all good. It's just sloppy all around. You just can't see the prequels the same way after this.
If they do one day continue Qimir's story, it'll probably be in a book, because as we know, Season 2's been shelved. But in your estimation, and this is the question of the day, was Qimir one of the stronger characters of the Acolyte? Let me know down below. But moving on, we do have a big update. I feel like at the moment we're very much in a limbo in regards to the Star Wars franchise. Yes, there are tons of projects announced, but it's also a period of change. We're anticipating the return of Star Wars on the big screen, but we don't know how fans are going to react. We don't know what those movies are going to be like. There is hope, but also anxiety. And while the fandom has been speculating on YouTube and Reddit and Twitter and you name it, an actual actor from Star Wars himself has shed some light on where he thinks the franchise is headed. And I'm happy to say his comments debunk a major rumor from last week. I'm talking about Mandalorian actor Giancarlo Esposito, the supposedly dead Moff Gideon. In light of recent rumors that we're not getting a fourth season of The Mandalorian, that the Mandalorian and Grogu movie is going to be the final chapter for the show, Esposito reassures us not only does he think there is going to be more, but he predicts a lot more. There is a lot of talk about who is the face of the franchise. I've said Ahsoka, Din Djarin, Grogu, and in 2026, when the Jon Favreau movie is expected to come out in May, the aforementioned latter two characters are certainly going to be representative figureheads of the Star Wars brand, the faces of the new direction for the Star Wars franchise, based on the show. And Giancarlo Esposito thinks it's just the beginning. He said this: as with the MCU, Disney will finally figure out how to join all of these characters into one really great film or TV show. That is my sense of where it will go. And here's the important bit, guys. He says Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau have a new vision. Continuing on with a Mandalorian movie, my sense is that it's all going to converge, and we're going to have another set of films, another trilogy, or more. And this, my dear friends, is exactly what I've been talking about concerning phases of the Mandoverse. Ahsoka, Book of Boba Fett, Skeleton Crew, Mando, it's all coming together now for the big screen. And it doesn't mean the story's going to stop. The opposite. And it seems as though Jon Favreau's movie and then Dave Filoni's movie is just going to be the start. I believe it's going to be a three-parter, a new Star Wars trilogy, and I'm hoping Bryce Dallas Howard, one of my favourite creatives at Lucasfilm, gets involved. But I have a strong feeling this is also connected to the recent Jon Watts announcement. After Skeleton Crew, he's made a new deal with Disney to create more movies. Is one of them Star Wars and Mandoverse related? Does it continue the story of Skeleton Crew? So going back to what Giancarlo said, his take on things and assessment are just a prediction. Unless, if they confirm Moff Gideon survived Season 3, he might know for certain, because he may have had conversations with Jon and Dave, and The Mandalorian and Grogu is in full production as we speak. So this could definitely be an exciting hint. I also want to point your attention to the fact Jon Favreau said The Mandalorian's third season was just the middle installment of a much larger story. Those were his words. So if you think The Mandalorian is coming to an end anytime soon, you'd probably be mistaken. Even if they make more movies and more spin-offs, even if the name of the show changes, even if the current format isn't necessarily maintained, the through line of the show, Din and Grogu, or one day probably just Grogu, I think is going to persevere, make no mistake. If you enjoyed this video, my dear friends, please be sure to give me a big fat thumbs up, check me out on socials, and may the Force be with you, always.